When my boyfriend and I are doing the dirty on his bed, I notice there's a little lens pointing straight at us. He goes to grab it and we realize it's a little camera. The whole time we've been doing stuff on his bed, it's been recording us. That's when my boyfriend Dan said that it must have been his crazy ex. Let's call her Casey. He had told me that she was really crazy, but I didn't think she was that crazy. Dan starts looking throughout his whole apartment and he finds 2 more little cameras. One in the kitchen and one in the bathroom. As you can imagine, we didn't sleep that entire night. Of course, we went to the police and they opened an investigation, but they said they couldn't find anything. A week later, I get a DM from Casey, his ex-girlfriend. She starts abusing me through DM, calling me a bunch of names. She even said that I stole Dan from her, but I hadn't even met Dan when they broke up. Then she sends me a picture of my house, which means she knows where I live. I go straight to my boyfriend's apartment, and when I open the door, guess who's there? Casey is sitting on the couch with my boyfriend. It gets scarier. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend's crazy ex is sitting on the couch, and I'm terrified. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. She had just finished sending me a bunch of DMs on Instagram, totally abusing me. But my boyfriend didn't know this. I walk into the apartment and they're both sitting on the couch. She turns around and asks him, "Is that her?" My boyfriend looks at me with a serious face and says, "Yes, that's her." Then she shows me DMs on Instagram that I had supposedly sent to some guy, and that she passed herself off as this guy to see if I would fall. And the messages were so dirty and disgusting. I tell my boyfriend that's not me and that I would never do that to him. He just stares at me and doesn't say anything. That's when I try to show him all of the DMs that she had just sent me. But I noticed they were all gone. She actually unsent every single DM. Now I had no proof and it was just her word against mine. That's when I accused her of planting the cameras in our bedroom. She actually smiled at me and turned around and told my boyfriend she would never do that. Then she slapped me. My boyfriend's crazy ex slaps me and lunges at me. Of course, I start attacking her right back. My boyfriend separates us finally and asks both of us to leave his apartment. I was so crushed that he didn't believe me. So far, she had spied on us in bed, hacked my Instagram to send DMs to herself to make it look like I was talking to another guy, and threatened me by telling me that she knew where I lived. Oh yeah, and she physically attacked me too. I left my boyfriend's apartment and a few days later he comes looking for me. I explained everything to him and he said he had no choice but to believe me. His ex was too crazy. Then he told me that she went back to his apartment that night and picked his lock. She got naked and crawled into his bed. He woke up, kicked her out, and went straight to get a restraining order. I scanned his apartment for more cameras and found 2 more. What should we do? Story time about how I caught my boyfriend cheating on me and I got him arrested. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. My boyfriend and I have only been together for 2 months. I'm gonna call him Rex. We live in a pretty small town and everybody knows that Rex is a player. He asked me out and I said yes because I always had a crush on him. After a few dates, he asked me to be his girlfriend. I said yes under the condition that he was totally monogamous. And he said of course. A few weeks into the relationship, I noticed that he was always hiding his phone from me. And whenever he would put his phone on a table, he would flip the screen side down. Of course, this had me on high alert. One night we went out with friends and I made sure that he got super drunk. I took advantage and went through all of his Instagram DMs. And of course he had been talking to about 30 girls. And I knew some of these girls and they knew that we were together. He had even set up a date with one of the girls for the following day at a bar. And you better believe that I was gonna catch him red-handed. I show up to the bar and I don't see them. I go back to the parking lot and there he is in his car making out with this girl. I knock on the window. Part 2 is up. My boyfriend is in his car making out with another girl. I caught them red-handed. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. My boyfriend Rex quickly puts on his shirt, and the other girl puts on her shirt too. I try to open the door, but it's locked. And to my surprise, my boyfriend gets mad at me and asks me what I'm doing there. So of course I say to him, "What are you doing here?" That's when he finally gets out of the car, and he tells the other girl to stay in the car. I told him that he had promised to be monogamous. That's when he said that I was crazy and that he had never promised that, and that he had no intention to be serious with me. Then he said that I made that entire conversation up in my head. And then he told me to leave. I was so shocked, I couldn't believe what he had just said to me. The girl gets out of the car and she actually apologizes to me. And she told me that Rex had told her that he was single. Then Rex lunges at her, starts pulling her hair, and pushes her to the ground. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend lunges at the girl that I just caught him cheating on me with. He starts pulling her hair and pushes her to the ground. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Tried to get him to stop and I pulled his arm. Then he turns around and starts chasing me. I run back into the bar and 2 guys stop him. I called the cops right away and they came and arrested him. Later on that day, he asked me to bail him out and I said no. Everybody knows what he did. The other girl is trying to press charges and my dad wants me to get a restraining order. But I'm still in love with him and I don't want to get him in any more trouble. I even want to take him back, but I know I shouldn't, right? Storytime about my horrible toxic ex. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime. It was sent to me on Instagram. My ex and I had been friends for 3 months. When he asked me out, I said yes because I really liked him. But the relationship only lasted 1 month. He started showing red flags really quick. He would constantly try to monopolize my time. If I told him that I couldn't hang out, he would show up to my house randomly without even asking if he could come over. It's like he was checking to see if I was telling the truth or not. Anytime I would be babysitting, he would also show up and ask to hang out. Obviously, I would say no because I was working. He also monitored all of my social media. If I posted anything about BLM, he would get so angry and he wouldn't talk to me. One day I get a text from him saying, "I don't think this is gonna work out anymore." He actually broke up with me over text. I was on a road trip with my family at the time, so I was so distracted and I thought I'd be okay. A few days later, I find out he started dating my best friend. Then he started sending me abusive text messages. Part 2 is up. My ex started sending me abusive text messages, calling me an SLUT and saying that I was stupid. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Tried to reason with him, but he just wouldn't listen. Of course, I ended up blocking him. A few days later, he showed up at my house. I asked him why he was there. He said he was just riding his bike around. I didn't buy it for 1 second. He made it a habit of just showing up to my house on his bike. Then he started texting me from another number. He was constantly trying to get my attention. Of course, I blocked that number as well. I get a message from my best friend, who had started dating my ex when we broke up. She asked me if we could hang out and I said yes. Talked for a few hours and we made up. She explained to me how verbally abusive he was with her too, and that he was stalking her as well. But guess what? It gets worse. On top of all of that, he called my sister and started telling her that I was too fat for him, that I was unattractive, and that I didn't bring enough energy into the relationship, and that's why he broke up with me. That's when I called him and we got into a huge fight. Part 3 is up. My ex called my sister and told her that I was too fat for him and that I was unattractive and that's why he had to break up with me. That's when we got into a huge fight over the phone. Of course, we both said extremely hurtful things. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Like I said, he had been stalking me and sending me abusive text messages. I kept blocking him and he would keep coming back. And again, he would show up at my house. His excuse was that he was riding his bike around my neighborhood. I told him I needed space. A few days later, I'm hanging out with my friends and there he is. Shows up totally uninvited. Everyone knew what had happened, but he still tried to talk to me. Of course, I ignored him. A few hours later, I get a ton of notifications from Instagram. Guess what? It's my ex. He started begging for forgiveness. He was trying to justify every single thing he did. There was no excuse for his abusive behavior. Not to me or my best friend. I told him to leave me alone, but he still kept sending the messages. They're starting to get to me. I know I shouldn't want to be with him, but part of me still loves him. He's the first person I've ever fallen in love with. I don't know what to do. Storytime about how I found out my sugar daddy was stalking me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I signed up to a sugar daddy website last year. I lost my job because of COVID. Just started my own small business and things were not going well. I also helped my parents out with money because I didn't want them to be working during COVID. I signed up to a website and instantly I started getting messages. One man stood out because he was very active and owned several businesses. I told him I didn't want to meet up because I just wasn't going to do that, but also because of COVID. He agreed to have a phone conversation with me and then eventually he offered me $5,000 a month. This was more than enough to help me and my parents out. After that, I was basically his online companion. He would text me and I would text back. We went out to dinner a few times, but because of COVID, we kept our distance. It was truly the perfect scenario for me. Then I noticed that he started to get really clingy. If I didn't text him back right away, he would get upset. One day I got another message from the sugar daddy website. Another man was asking me to go out to dinner twice a week, and he wanted to pay me $1,000 for this. So I said, of course. When I told sugar daddy number 1 that I'd be busy 2 days out of the week, he got really mad and asked me where I lived. I told him I couldn't tell him. Part 2 is up. That's when my sugar daddy asked me where I lived. I was not about to tell him where I lived. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I told him I couldn't tell him. And he got really upset and offered me $2,000 more, which means that he would be paying me $7,000 a month. Then he said that he didn't want me to be with any other sugar daddies. At this point, I hadn't even told him that I was approached by another sugar daddy. So how did he know that I was talking to another one? I accepted his offer of $7,000 a month, but this only made him even worse. He would call me all the time and ask me where I was, and he would constantly ask me where I lived. He noticed a change in me, and that's when he offered to buy me a car. A Mercedes, to be exact. I didn't know if I should accept or not because I knew it would make him feel like he had more ownership over me. I told him that I wasn't sure if I should accept the car because of his behavior. Then he said that he would buy me my own apartment. I felt really creeped out, so I decided not to answer his phones or his messages the rest of the night. 2 hours later, I'm laying in bed and I hear a really hard knock at my door. It was him. Part 3 is